Switzerland. And our main presenter today will be Daniel Spichtinger of the European Commission. Let's quickly have a look at the outline of this event. I will give you a brief introduction in the next couple of minutes, which then will be followed by the main presentation on open access, which will last approximately half an hour. It will be followed by a question and answer session until approximately 10 to 11. This webinar is held within the framework of the EC Finance project PeopleNetwork Plus. This is a network of all People national contact points. We have 15 partners and more than 70 associated partners. This project comes to an end now at the end of March after a little bit more than 2 years duration. And it is coordinated by our colleagues in Italy of APRE. Have a look here at the setup of this webinar. The big window on the left shows you the slides of the current presentation. That you have an idea of who is talking to you, we always add a little picture on the upper right-hand corner. And just beneath it is a chat window for your questions. We invite you to ask your questions during the presentation. We will collect them, moderate them. My colleague Cyril Girardin will do this, forward them to the speaker, and we'll have time afterwards for the answers. Just for your information, this webinar will be registered and uploaded later on Eurisearch's YouTube channel. You will get a follow-up email, of course, at the end with this presentation in PDF format and the link to the YouTube webinar. Now I will hand over the microphone to Daniel Spichtinger, who will explain to all of us everything you need to know regarding open access. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you, Juliane, for the kind invitation, and also to Francesco Kienzle for all the setup of this webinar. And I'm happy to be with you virtually today and explain a bit how open access works. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint presentation, and as Juliane has said, there are questions afterwards, which I will answer. I hope you can all understand me. In case there are any problems, I think the organizers will alert me to it in the chat function. So let me give you a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about. First of all, a brief definition of what open access is, since also different people define it in a different way. Then a little bit about our policy. And of course, a practical implementation of the policy is being done from the side of the Commission in FP7 and now in Horizon 2020. A few words about the international landscape, and then challenges and conclusions. So what do we understand by open access? There are several definitions, but we use quite a simple one. We mean online access at no charge to the user. And then we make a distinction between open access to peer-reviewed scientific publications and open access to research data. And we see the two of them related, but also that they both need a slightly different approach. Talking primarily now about publications, we distinguish between two business models, the so-called green and the gold. Green meaning self-archiving, meaning that you publish, as a researcher, you publish in a journal of your choice, and at the same time you publish a copy of your, well, you don't publish, you deposit a copy of your publication in a repository, in a database. This can be a thematic database, or it can be a database from an institution like your university, or from an international organization. And after a so-called embargo period, the article in this database becomes available open access. And the embargo period ensures that the publishers, where you have primarily published in their journal, they have a period to recoup the investment. And the second part, the second business model is the so-called gold route. That means you publish directly in open access with the publisher. Then, of course, the publication becomes available open access immediately. But the publisher will, in many cases, charge some so-called article processing charges to recover their costs. And these are then borne by, well, the author, but when we say the author, we usually mean either the institution where the researcher is based or a funder like the European Commission. Then let me also say what open access is not. It is, first of all, not an obligation to publish. So we never, at least on the European level, we never force our researchers to do a publication. It's always up to the researcher whether they decide, I want to publish my findings or not. It's also not at odds with patenting and IPR. This is a question we get quite a lot. So we have prepared a little graphic here to see how do we see the relation between open access and IPR. This was done with the help of our colleagues from the IPR help desk. So this graphic illustrates that you have your research results, and then you decide, do I want to go for an IP protection, which can be a patent or can be other form of protection. And if you do so, that's fine with us. I mean, commercial exploitation is something that the Commission actively encourages. We only say, well, if you don't go for IP protection and you go for a publication instead, then you should do it open access. So it's a complementary way of disseminating your findings. It's not something that we see in conflict. We also like to stress, now this is the third point under what open access is not, that open access publications go to the same peer-reviewed publication as the more traditional one. Why? Because in the self-archiving, in the green way, you deposit in the repository the peer-reviewed publication, peer-reviewed manuscript. And when you do the direct route with the gold model, you publish directly, it is also peer-reviewed. Why are we dealing with open access as the Commission? Well, we have different roles to play. First of all, we are policy makers. We are dealing with open access in the context of EU legislation, and we also invite the member states to act. But we are also a funding agency, so we have the possibility to set our own rules for access and dissemination for the research that we fund. And we are a capacity builder. We support projects that either do research on open access or provide help and support on open access and how to comply with it. Coming back, why we do open access? Well, it's not that we do open access just because we think it's a good idea and we like it. It's really concretely that the Commission has the objective of optimizing the impact of the research that it funds at the European level, but also at the member states level. So open access is just one way where we feel that this can help us to optimize the impact that we are having. Of course, very often in the context of open access, we talk about, well, okay, the impact is on better and more efficient science because results are easily available, you can easily check them. And that is, of course, to be seen in the context of the changing scientific system, which we sometimes call Science 2.0. But we also feel that there is an economic argument to be made for open access, namely especially for small and medium-sized companies that in most cases, I would say, cannot afford to have subscriptions to 20 different journals just because maybe there is one article that could be relevant. But if these articles are available online for free, it's much easier for them to just check, maybe that's something that could be interesting for the product that I'm developing. And of course, the third aspect is that it's taxpayers' money that we are using, so we should be very open and transparent on the results that are being funded by the taxpayer. Both, of course, making this available to individuals who are interested, but also non-for-profit associations, for instance. Just take the instance of climate change, where I think there's also a lot of interest from non-for-profit organizations in the research that's going on. So that's what we call responsible research innovation. Here in the Commission, we deal with open access in two different directorate generals. Director General is, I'd say, very roughly equivalent to a ministry. So we have Vice President Cruz, who's the Commissioner for the Digital Agenda, who deals with open access. And we have my commissioner, the Commissioner for Research, Gagan Quinn, who also deals with open access, in our case, in the context of Horizon 2020 and the so-called European Research Area and Innovation Union. So talking now about our policy, there are 3 documents that I would say are relevant and interesting, and if you want to know more, I invite you to have a look at them, which is first of all the European Research Area communication. So the ERA, it forms a sort of umbrella for what we're doing in open access. And then 2 more detailed documents, which are really only about access to scientific information, a communication and a recommendation to the member states. So I'm going to say a few words about these 3 documents. First of all, about the European Research Area. So the concept of the European Research Area is that it's based on the internal market, in which researchers, scientific knowledge and technology circulate freely. So basically there are 5 priority areas in which the ERA is active, and there is one, and this is the one you can see in red here, which is about the optimal circulation, access to, and transfer of scientific knowledge. And that is where open access is anchored. So it's one part of the European Research Area. And this is complemented by commitments from key stakeholder organizations that you see here listed on the bottom. These are European umbrella organizations for research, research performing organizations, sometimes also research funders. And those that are listed here, they have signed memoranda of understanding with the Commission to help implement the ERA, and of course, as part of that, also open access. So going now to a bit more in detail what we say in the ERA communication, we say that, okay, we invite the member states to act. So this is the recommendation that I'm going to talk about in a moment. We are working with the stakeholders. This is the memoranda of understanding that we signed. And we also committed ourselves as the Commission to promote open access in Horizon 2020. And that is outlined in the communication that we have specifically on better access to scientific information. This is actually here now, the slide. So this communication towards better access to scientific information, this is basically the baseline for outlining where we are with open access. It was done in 2012. So where do we stand? What are the barriers to change? And what are the actions on the European level? The recommendation to the member states then goes into more detail, and it recommends that member states define policies and implement open access to publications, open access to research data, but as well preservation and reuse, and e-infrastructure. The idea is to have a consistency between Horizon 2020 and what member states are doing. And for facilitating the exchange with the member states, we said we would set up a system of national points of reference. So the idea is to have in each country one or several people that we can contact and that can contact us for exchanging information on open access. So this is what all I've said. This is basically what we published in 2012, these 3 documents. And this slide is a bit presented to give you an overview of what happened since then. So this is, 2013, now it's 2014. But I think it gives still a good overview of the progress. So with the member states, we had the ERA progress report, which was published in the fall of last year. And for open access, this ERA progress report notes that there is gradual yet visible progress. meaning that in many countries, indeed, they have implemented policies and actions to promote open access, but only in very few cases these are hard laws. In many cases, these are soft law instruments. We also had a first meeting of these national points of reference that I mentioned, which are our contacts in the member states in December last year. So it was more or less a get to know each other meeting and to discuss what are the issues that we want to follow up on. Also, my commissioner participated in the Competitiveness Council where she outlined open access. And beginning of this year, we saw that the ERAC, which is a committee of member states working on the ERA, is going to launch a task force apparently on open access and innovation. So we will follow that process. For stakeholder organizations, I think we can be very lucky, and I think this webinar is one opportunity to indeed say it's very much the case that our stakeholders are very much interested in the topic of open access. So they have organized a variety of events, and in many of them, as many as we can, we try to participate. For instance, we had the Lehrerru conference which was dedicated to open science, specific workshops on open data. There's also Post who's active on open access, and Science Europe. So this was only a few excerpts of the activities that are organized by stakeholders. We also discussed with the 5 or now 6 stakeholder organizations that have signed the Memorandum of Understanding for the ERA. We also discussed open access as one of the issues in the high-level stakeholder platform that they have to interact with us. And for stakeholders, the ERA progress report notes that actually now a significant number of research funders and research performing organizations support open access on the national level. And now we are coming actually to the question, okay, I've talked about what are member states doing, what are stakeholders doing within the context of this European research area, but now we are actually coming to what the Commission is doing on open access. In FP7, we had a pilot on open access, and we said open access costs, so this is more or less the gold way, are eligible for all projects, but this is limited to the duration of the project in question. Since these costs, they can be claimed as part of the FP7 budget that a project has. And then we had the pilot on green open access, which was in 7 areas with about 1,500 projects participating and covering about 20% of the total FP7 budget. So this was for publishing in a repository, the Green Route, with a 6 and 12-month embargo period. Also, the colleagues in DG Connect have been funding the Open Air project, which is a portal that gives access to repositories across Europe. So that is, I think, the idea, and it's a very good one, that Open Air gives you access to an open access green article in whatever repository this article is located. So it doesn't matter if it's in the university repository or a thematic repository. Open Air will find it if you put it in the search engine of Open Air. They are also having a network of national help desks. So this is more for projects who want to know what open access is and how it works. And of course, we here in the Commission, we are limited in our staff. So for open access, so people can contact the national help desks for more information. So now I'm going to talk about, so FP7 was a bit the past, although it's of course FP7 projects are still running. And now I'm going to talk a bit about open access in Horizon 2020. So where should we look for open access in Horizon 2020? Well, there are different documents where open access is mentioned. you can see them listed here. Coming from the most general, which is the regulation establishing Horizon 2020, which was passed by the Parliament and the Council, to guidelines that we have published. So the regulation is in red since it's basically our legal basis on which to implement open access. And then there are the rules for participation, which also give some details, and then we go more into the operational aspects, the work programs, the model grant agreements, and then indeed the guidelines. And the guidelines are probably the most specific document. So regulation establishes the principle, but the guidelines, they really give you the nitty-gritty on how to implement open access in Horizon 2020. And I will provide links at the end of my presentation. So coming first to the regulation, we see basically that, of course, Horizon 2020 was a lengthy process of agreement between all partners, and in the end the text says that open access to scientific publications shall be ensured and open access to research data shall be promoted. So that forms the basis of how we implement open access, and we are moving for the publications from a pilot to an underlying principle. Meaning, so this gives you again the overview what has changed from FP7 to Horizon 2020, meaning that in Horizon 2020 open access to scientific peer-reviewed publication will be an obligation, but it will be up to the participants to choose how they want to implement that obligation, through the green way or through the gold way. If you go for the green way, we have the embargo periods of 6 to 12 months. If you go for the gold way, open access costs will still be eligible during the project, but we face the question, what happens with articles that are being published at the end of a grant or once the grant is over? Because then, of course, you can't use the grant money anymore. So we are actually piloting support here. So we are having a project that will look at providing some support for post-grant publications if you want to publish gold. And we will see what is actually the take-up of that and how much is it really an issue. We've had some statistics which say actually we don't have that many publications coming after the project. Why? Maybe, and here we are speculating a bit, because some authors are just taking over their publications to the next grant. But anyway, we said let's have a look at that and let's pilot some support. So this is currently an open call in the work program, and the project will be evaluated by independent experts later this year. We also encourage authors to retain the copyright from the articles and grant licenses instead. I see there are some questions, but I'm going to go through them in the end and then have a Q&A session. So this is how the mandate looks like in the model grant agreement. It's basically what I have said already, noting that if you go for the gold way, which you are free to do, you should in any case also deposit a copy in a repository. So just that we have ensure that both ways are supported. We also want to ensure that the bibliographic metadata to your publication is made available as well, since that ensures the traceability of the publication and basically that you can find it. And then we have a soft formulation on the research data. So we say, well, projects should aim to deposit also the research data that is needed to validate the results. But that, for publications, is optional. While it brings us now, indeed, to what we are actually doing, this pilot that we are doing on research data. And this pilot was discussed quite intensively, I would say, in the last year. So I think we have 3 questions that we had to answer, and so I'm going to go and answer these 3 questions on the pilot. First of all, which areas of Horizon 2020 should be covered? What kind of data should this pilot cover? And what about data management? So we decided that the pilot will cover a selected number of areas in Horizon 2020, which are listed here. Basically giving a good balance between the different pillars of Horizon 2020, and also making sure that those areas that we're keen to participate are included. So the idea is that if your project is in one of those areas listed here on this slide, you will by default be part of that pilot. But if your area is not in this slide, if you're not part of these so-called core areas of the pilot, you can still participate on a voluntary basis. But then you are not automatically presumed to be in, but you can say, well, for my project, I'm in nanotechnology, for instance, and I still want to participate, although nanotechnology is not part of the pilot. You can do so. And then you can also actually opt out of this pilot. So, we said, well, there may be several cases where it actually makes no sense, or you are not really encouraged to make your data open access. Obviously, the first case is easy if you don't generate any data. Then you don't have to make it open access. If you feel you have a conflict with IPR concerns, so that goes back to the beginning of my presentation. If you say, well, I really want to commercialize my product, my results, I want to commercialize them to develop a product, then you don't have to make this data open access. If you feel it conflicts with your confidentiality obligations or with rules on the protection of personal data. It's hot issues at the moment, so obviously you do not want to put non-anonymized data on the web, for instance, patient data. Or if you feel that there's a conflict with security obligation, that's the concept of malevolent use, so your data could easily be abused to develop a weapon, for instance. And then we have a last opt-out possibility, which is a bit, well, there may be other issues that we have not foreseen at the moment. So it says, if the achievement of the action's main objective would be jeopardized by making specific part of the research data open access, then this specific part you don't have to make open access. But the issue here then, as you can see with these opt-outs and opt-ins, is that really we want researchers to think about what they do with the data, what they make open access and also what they don't make open access. And for this they should use a data management plan. So I'm jumping to the data management plan first. So the data management plan will be obligatory for all projects participating in the pilot. And for others it will be optional. I mean, we think it's a good practice, but it's only optional for those that participate in the open access to research data pilot. And to clear a few misunderstandings about this here, these data management plans, they are not part of the evaluation. So you're not asked to submit a data management plan when you submit your project, but you should generate it within this first 6 months once your project has started, and update them as needed. So it will be asked to have this data management plan as a deliverable in your project. And the data management plan should answer questions such as what data will be collected, what standards will be used, how will the data be exploited, and how will it be curated and preserved. And now jumping back one slide, so what kind of data are we actually talking about? And again, we are talking primarily about the data needed to validate the results presented in the scientific publications, meaning the data underlying those publications. Why? Because ideally, and hopefully I would say, this is the data that you have treated, you have cleaned within more or less a presentable form, because you're using that data for your publication. And it's also, of course, the data most relevant to validate, as it says, what you have published on. There's also other data. I mean, there are different kinds of data typologies. For instance, we talk about other curated data, which is kind of treated, but it's not really underlying your publication. there's also, of course, a mass of raw data. And that we leave up to the projects, if they decide to make this open access or not. Again, something to be specified in the data management plan. So you participate in the pilot either because you are part of the core area and you have decided not to drop out, or because you voluntarily say, yes, I want to do it, if you're not part of the core area. And what you do then? So you deposit the data in a research data repository of your choice. Again, we leave this up to the researchers where they want to deposit this research data. In some areas we have quite well-developed infrastructure, some of it funded by EU money, so in that case, of course, maybe something to recommend, but in the end it will be up to the researcher where they want to put the data. And once you have deposited the data, to take the measures to make it possible to access, mine, exploit, reproduce, and disseminate that data free of charge. So we had the question, okay, but what about if I need specific tools to access that data? So I have the data online, but I can't really access and make sense of that data without a certain tool, a certain instrument, for instance, software. And there we say, well, you should at least, if you're a researcher, you should at least provide some information, okay, what do I need to make to read that data, to access that data? What kind of software? And where possible, provide the tools and instrument themselves. But here we say where possible, because we realize that may not always be feasible to do. From the side of the EU, of course, we are involved in supporting with various projects. So we'll come to that later. There's also the e-infrastructure call that is open. And we are also in the process of monitoring how this idea, this open access research data pilot, how that will be taken up in Horizon 2020. Okay, I think I have to speed up a little bit. That slide we had. Then one word on the international landscape. Obviously, we realize that open access is not something that we can do on our own here in Europe. It's really a global phenomenon that is very strong in the United States, but there are also other countries, for instance, in South America, the Cielo, for instance, initiative, that are quite active in open access. We basically funded a study to measure the growth of open access because we felt we were not really very much aware or informed, okay, how has the movement grown? So we commissioned a study to measure the growth of open access, which found out that actually there is quite a bit more in open access than we thought, if we define open access as both gold and the green open access. Because there are some studies which only look at gold and others only look at green. If you look only at gold, this percentage is lower. But if you look at both, we can say that 21 out of 28 EU member states have made the majority of open access, of papers open access by April 2013. We have 15 member states that have implemented open access national measures. And the study found that actually the green model at the moment is a bit more dominant than the gold. Also the hybrid model, meaning you can publish in a closed journal, you can publish a specific article open access. But maybe the main message here is indeed a higher proportion globally open access than we previously assumed. But of course, this varies a lot among the disciplines. So we have some areas in the natural sciences, biology, biomedical research, mathematics, statistics, general science and technology, where this so-called tipping point of more than 50% has passed. And we have others, such as social sciences and humanities, applied sciences, engineering and technology, where there is not so much. And we also looked at the open access advantage, meaning do you get more citations if you publish open access? And the study found that this is indeed true. So they studied about 20 disciplines, I think. And they found it was true that you have an advantage in being cited more often in all but 4. We also found that the majority of 48 major science funders considered both gold and green open access acceptable, like we do in the Commission. And more than 75% accepted embargo periods of 6 to 12 months. For data, we found that indeed here the policies are not as far developed as in publications, but that this is really up and coming. We are also, of course, working with international organizations such as the Global Research Council and the G8, as well as the UNESCO, and we have been quite active participations in the Berlin conferences on open access. Now, this is just an overview, a timeline if you want. We started working on open access in 2006 with a study on the scientific publication market, and basically then all the way up to 2013 and now 2014. Of course, there are also new developments which we will take into account. Basically, we have to see open access as one part of a changing scientific system. So that is something I mentioned already earlier, what we sometimes follow up or summarize in the concept of Science 2.0, meaning also the trends towards big data, data-intensive science, which is then also connected with legal issues, for instance, with text and data mining, but also issues such as alternative metrics and how are researchers being evaluated, and is it still state of the art, I would say, to evaluate a researcher solely or primarily on the publications that they have published in a high impact journal, or is this something that also needs to change? But this is, of course, not something that we can regulate on the EU level. This is member states' institutional issue. Also, things like citizen science, for instance, having new actors, citizen participating in science, also new publishing models, new business models, new ways of doing peer review. So this is all the broader concept where open access fits in as one piece of the puzzle. So this is the summary, basically. I'm 1 minute over, I think, Swiss punctuality. So in summary, basically we see open access as a means to improve knowledge circulation and providing value for money for the taxpayers' money in the end. Horizon 2020, I would sum up, we are ambitious on open access, but we are also pragmatic on how we implement it, especially by allowing both gold and green to be used, since not all the countries are the same and we are in a transition period of the changing scientific system. Support for open access in Horizon 2020, I would specifically refer you to the work programs on e-infrastructure and also science with and for society, where we have open calls at the moment. So what is our idea? Well, we say open access must be effective, affordable, competitive, and sustainable for researchers and innovative businesses. So, last but not least, how you can reach us, some pointers here. Here's my email address and also my colleague Monica, who's working on open access, and a number of links. Our open access website on the Europa server. We know that it's not always easy to navigate the Europa website, so this is the specific link. Also, a bit more about the European Research Area, which I've mentioned as the umbrella, and the Innovation Union, which is focusing more on the economic aspects of open access. The study to measure the growth of open access, here's a link to the press release, which then links you directly to the results of the study for those who want to know more about that. And last not but least, the guidance document on how we implement open access in Horizon 2020. Finally, we have a Twitter account, which used to be run by my former colleague Jean-François, but which I have now taken over, where we publish interesting initiatives, results, and our own activities on open access. So, on that note, I think we are finishing my presentation, and I'm having a look at the questions. So first question from Anders Lecour Harbo. Does open access include software and not just data? So that I've answered already in the question, in the presentation, that indeed primarily we're talking about the data underlying publications, but at least providing information about the tools needed and that to access that data, which can be software. Question 2, is it possible to give a detailed definition of research data? Yes, it is. I haven't done so in the presentation, but I think in the guidance document we have a detailed definition of what we understand by data. So, what else do we have here? Okay, the embargo period for green publications, how will it be determined by interdisciplinary papers? It's a difficult question, that one. I mean, we are saying that it's 6 months for the national. You deposit 6 months for the natural sciences and 12 months for the humanities and social sciences. So I think that will be a case-to-case decision to be made. In case you really have an interdisciplinary paper between the two, it's maybe something that if you have a project running, you can discuss with your project officer. Personally, I think we should not be more, as we say in German, Catholic than the Pope. So we should have some flexibility in here as well. Yes. Okay. Next question. What about open access for books? This is again, I think you're raising all the hard questions here for me. Yes, so monographs. We have said in our guidelines that we talk generally about publications. So implicitly that would include monographs. But the business model, the system has developed for articles, which are indeed much more prominent in the natural sciences, and in the social sciences and humanities you have more emphasis on monographs. So we said, well, we should take this into account when we apply the open access requirement, to say that, okay, we are mostly focusing on articles, and for open access to monographs, I think it says that in the guideline as well, that we will apply a bit of a more lenient approach, I would say, for the moment, since we are aware that these business models are being developed. So I think they will be there in the end, but that we are not quite there at the moment. Then a question on the embargo time again. Who sets the embargo time? Well, we are talking here about why do we have an embargo period? First of all, we have an embargo period because you publish your article in a traditional journal, and you deposit it at the same time in a repository. So if you make the article immediately available, of course, very often the scientific publishers are not that happy with it, because then it's available for free in the repository, and it's available for payment, for subscription on the website. So they say, we should have an embargo period where you can only access it on the website when you have to pay for it, which allows us to keep, to get our costs back that we had. So who sets the embargo period is a kind of a compromise that we came up with here, to say 6 and 12 months, in order to between the interests of the publishers, but also to have a balance between the interest to have articles out there while they are still relevant. You can have a very long embargo period, for instance, 48 months, but then in many areas of research, this article may not be state of the art anymore after 2 years. In some, for instance, mathematics, it may still be the case. In others, biomedical sciences, probably not. So we had to find a kind of balance between these conflicting demands, and we had in the FP7 pilot the 6 to 12 months embargo period. We did not receive any complaints about it, so we kept to it. And also, although publishers are keen to have longer embargo periods, there is not much evidence that the 6 to 12 month embargo period is in any way harmful for them. We did not experience it with the pilot. And if you look globally, actually a number of articles, up to 60%, are available in green without any embargo period. So that is how we set them, and that's kind of a bit of background information about that. Question 9. Do you have any numbers on how many authors have limited transfer of rights to publishers using the standard agreement provided by the Commission? So in FP7, we provided some guidance to authors, indeed, to comply and also to encourage them not to sign over their copyright. We did a midterm interim review of the pilot, but there I think this question of how many have actually used this agreement was not asked. But now we have to look again at the FP7 pilot once more. Once I would say FP7 is really completed, because we have still quite a few FP7 projects running. So we have to have another evaluation, a final evaluation if you want, and then I think this would be something interesting to look at. Next question. Question number 10. Okay, the question, why would someone voluntarily participate in the data pilot? Does it give project applications any competitive advantages? So as I've said, whether you participate or in the pilot or not is not part of the project evaluation. So it's not really evaluated, except of course there is one sentence in the impact criteria, but that only says describe if it's relevant for you, if you make your data open access. So it does not give any immediate, I would say, advantage in the proposal phase. Nevertheless, there are quite a few people who are active in open access to data who thinks it's a good idea. And we thought, well, we don't want to harm anyone who wants to participate in the pilot, even if they are not part of the core areas. So that's why we put in this opt-in clause, because otherwise we could have a paradoxical situation that somebody wants to participate in nanotechnology, for instance, but they cannot because this is not a core area. So this is simply, I would say, a light touch way to have a bit of a broader coverage for those who want to. Will the participation... okay, so now a question for our moderator, for Juliane. Will the presentation be available for download after the webinar? So I think this is the last question. So then I would like to say maybe goodbye to you. I hope it was an interesting and informative webinar. I have to say from my side as a presenter, if you don't have the audience in front of you, it is always a bit difficult to judge if you're going the right pace. But I hope it was relevant and interesting for you. And I remain, of course, available also on my email address if you have questions. And then probably I will hand over now to Juliane for the final words.
Daniel, I can reassure you, you did a wonderful job in just the right pace. Thanks a lot for the more than brilliant presentation and also for answering so competently all the questions. Thanks also to the audience. You stayed with us throughout the webinar. You will get a follow-up email with the presentation in a PDF format. We will also upload this webinar, sort of a short video, on the YouTube channel of Your Research. We will send this link as well in the follow-up email within the next days. You are invited to view the webinar again later, or also to pass it on to your peers and colleagues. If there are remaining questions, you have the contact data of the specialists at the European Commission. In case you have specific questions regarding the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, you are of course invited to contact the national contact points. There is a national contact point in every European country and in most of the other countries as well. You will find our contact data and more information on the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions also on the website, which will end this presentation now. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and goodbye.